Creative mood. Another episode this week. I sat down with producer, songwriter, engineer, mastermind, the very smooth, nice, and genuine Connor Seidel. He is the producer for many, many artists in the likes of Charlotte Cardin, Claudia Bouvette, Gray, Katie Tupper, Les Sœurs Boulay, Ralph, Elliot Maginot, and Matt Holubowski, to just name those guys and girls. I got wind of him when I began to notice that some people that I was interviewing here were being produced by the same guy, so that guy's name kept coming up. Elliot Maginot, aka Gab, introduced us for his birthday when we went to play Spike Ball. An invitation I graciously accepted, and I just decided to sit on the sidelines, as it were. It was hot that day, guys. Don't hold it against me. I want to say that I'm very honored to have Connor on today because I've never spoken like that with a record producer before, someone who gets hired by labels to produce whole bodies of work. That is something I hope one day I get to, those are the kind of people I hope to one day work with, and for sure they're intriguing because they come in all shapes and sizes, and I think you guys will appreciate that look into that type of work. Before I leave you, I want to let you know that we filmed the video clip for Transformations, the song you're hearing right now, and it was a very nerve-wracking experience for me. The song should be coming out hopefully by the end of the month of September. I had fun, so I want to say thank you, Sorai, thank you, Originate, thank you, MC, and my girl Juju, who happened to come by and support the boy. And Jan, of course, who I can never not forget anymore. Jan, I love you, bro. You're my go-to. You know this. And Felix, who wasn't with us, but co-produces all my songs. I love all of you guys. You're my team. And I can't wait to share that song with you guys. I can't wait to share the video. And yeah, so I guess I'll keep it to that this week. Connor, thank you so very much for coming and offering your time so graciously to me today. Once again, I ask any of you that if you have any comments, whether they're positive or negative, please take a moment to DM, email me at creativemoodpodcast@gmail.com or straight on Instagram. Last thing, subscribe to the podcast on your streaming platform. It helps me greatly. Have a good week, my friends. Talk soon. And I think we're good. Is this recording? I think it's recording.
Yo. We're here. Ableton.
Yeah. Connor.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be doing this.
Yeah, me too. It's so fun to have a chance to kind of talk about what we do every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was... we were just saying how it's like we have to record. We press record at some point. Otherwise, we're just going to talk.
Yeah, immediately. Talking about every artist, every subject that we have in common, which is fun.
Connor, am I wrong to say that you're a record producer? Would that be a professional title?
Yeah, I guess I would say that in a traditional sense. I think these days I'm growing more into the kind of writer-producer zone. That's what I've been doing mostly the last 2 years, really writing. I'm more excited about that side and kind of that side of development. But I would say if I had to talk to my mom and her friends, it's, I work on music. I'm a record producer, yeah.
There's a natural progression, though, in all those things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, I feel like it was a fairly non-traditional path of finding what my interests were, where it started really by running a studio when I was like 13, 14, working with every local punk band and really being like an engineer, caring about gear and microphones. And it's just grown so far away from that over the last 10, 15 years where now that's almost at the lowest priority of my interest, gear and what we're using. Yeah. And now it's conceptually, what are we talking about? What does it mean? Why are we doing it? And then, of course, the production side is fun too. But
yeah, and I bet like Yeah, that is the way it starts, isn't it? You just like, you have to get in somehow because, all this is like so much knowledge to acquire.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 27 now. Yeah.
Fuck. It's not that I feel old. It's that I feel like, I don't know. Like things have really changed with the way art has been democratized. And how gear has evolved, and now everybody has like a studio in their computer.
Totally. Yeah.
It's made all that knowledge so much more readily available.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny now because when I chat with, other producers who are even 5 years younger than me, when I was 13, 14, forums and availability of knowledge was super different at that time. Like we had Gear Sluts, and that was kind of like a hacked together forum of mostly analog guys that were like struggling to get on board with digital stuff.
Yeah.
But as of 5 years ago, everybody has an Apollo, everybody has UAD, so it's like a completely different scope. It's the same way I feel different about, if I have a friend whose younger sibling grew up with a phone in their pocket in high school, and I got my first phone when I was 16, 17 in cégep or in university. So it's like there's a huge generational gap even for us looking back 5 or 6 years now.
Absolutely. I started, quote unquote, getting into more technical shit when I was 17. That's like over 15 years ago.
Yeah. And were you just like making music before that? Just kind of like playing guitar and just more jamming? Was that where you started?
I got into drumming.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And then I fell in love with that when I was 13. And then I got into little bands. And, when you're a drummer, everything is more limited. I want to jam with people. Like I wasn't and I didn't come from a background where I had resources and, my parents were like feeding me. So it was just this thing of like, I wasn't because, now you get like 13-year-olds are going to be, I'm going to be a session drummer.
And they can do it. Yeah,
you can do it. You're like,
go online, selling stems online. It's crazy. Yeah.
Whereas when I was 13, it was like, well, I'm going to play in rock bands. That's it. Yeah. And then when I got to be 17, I needed a job, another job. I started working young, and then it just became this thing where I figured out that Emploi Québec would pay me to go learn a trade.
Oh, wow.
So I went to work at Le Petit Medley on La Plaza right here.
Oh, shit.
And that's where I learned, how to do live sound and just like how to work a mixing board and all that stuff. And that's how I got there.
Interesting.
But even then, I didn't, I only got into production like 6 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so far into the journey of loving music and understanding the technical side and making music. Wow, that's crazy.
It's really just like, I learn, now I see like there's no fixed path, and I came into this, like, if I were to make you listen to this, like, me and my buddy Felix, how we sound design, what we do, I think it's very impressive. We use the FM synth engine operator in Ableton.
Yeah.
People who know that thing usually don't touch it. They're like, nah, it's too complicated.
Too much, yeah.
And although it's been so late in the game, it's like everything you do before prepares you for that moment.
Totally.
So you're never really late.
Yeah.
You're just where you need to be.
And that's the beauty of the whole thing is, it kind of never ends. You can find new passion at any age. You can, new discoveries. You can become an artist at any age. Of course, that's different in, when you're working with major labels and on a pop sense, there are definitely timelines for artists, which is scary and frustrating that exists. But when you're just passionate and interested, there's a mastering engineer that I know called Marco Ramirez, who's in Texas at a studio called Sonic Ranch that I worked at briefly when I was very young. And one of the things that was just so inspiring about him is I think at the time he must have been 58 and nonstop inspiration, always looking for the new thing or some new album that, he was like listening to way more music than anybody I knew.
Right.
And it just proves that age should not determine your excitement, interest, or passion in what we do. And I always kind of think about him if ever I feel like I'm becoming complacent or just, not getting bored with what I'm doing, but just thinking like, oh, like I've done kind of these things. What's next? Yeah, you just get a bit comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then I think about him and he's always just, okay, I've done this 3 times. So let me just flip the table and let's go into this space and do something totally different. And he's always just flipping the table. I just love that.
Yeah.
So I was going to keep that back in mind. Totally.
So, all right, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Montreal, born and raised. on kind of the English side in the West Island.
Right.
Was very lucky that my dad kind of had, I guess call it electrical engineering experience. So when I was 13, 14, he would, we would like build compressors and build that kind of stuff.
Whew.
So super, super geeky stuff, build like Neve
Okay.
copies. And at that time I was
Really?
just, yeah.
How come? Your dad's a musician?
Not at all. Like zero.
He's just a nerd.
Zero music. Just a nerd who, had always kind of run his own businesses and was able to, deal with building gear and
Right.
get into it. And at that time, it wasn't like product DIY. You can buy a kit that tells you what steps you need to do. At that time, you'd be on a forum and one guy in Australia would be like, hey, I have the knobs. And this next guy would say, oh, well, I have these specific capacitors that are required,
Right.
So it was pretty tricky at the time. But yeah, super supported by my parents. And at that time, I was just, recording every punk band in the neighborhood. I was like 14,
Right.
15 and $50, no pay, whatever it was. I was just doing it all.
Where did you record them?
So I was super fortunate. My parents had like a little boathouse kind of connected to the house that I converted into a studio with my brother at the time.
My man had a boathouse.
Yeah, it was crazy
All right.
actually.
Okay.
So, we, just tore down a wall and, built a little booth and went through all this just kind of trial and error. Yeah, and it's funny just that all that kind of geeky stuff, I feel like I really got it out of my system before I turned, 16, 17,
Right.
18. So that, now it's just, I'm so on the other spectrum. I could care less where we are, how it's happening. It's about what's fun and inspiring.
That's what I've heard
Yeah.
about you through my conversations with our mutual
Cool.
acquaintances.
Interesting.
And so let me ask you then this. When did you, how did you fall into record production in the sense of like working with like artists who are a little bit more established now?
Yeah. Super gradual, just kind of nonstop working.
Yeah.
I'm definitely just, my girlfriend always laughs at me because my big saying is to just like do the work. That's like, I'm a big fan of the work. So for me, it's been kind of just not stopping and just continuing to do stuff. But yeah, I think there have been a couple things that I just got lucky with. I had the studio that I was running and just kind of bring in friends. I'd met Matt Holubowski when I was 18 or 19. And, he had just come back from this massive trip in Southeast Asia and was naive enough to come and just work with me literally in my parents' basement and make this album
Amazing.
there. And then he went on this ridiculous TV show called La Voix, and just overnight he sold a ton of albums, which was absolutely ridiculous because we had done an album launch a few days before in front of 14 people in an absolutely nothing bar, and we thought we were doing something cool, but it seemed to connect. And at that point, it just kind of started to open a bit more doors. I started getting calls to do other things, and just kind of navigating that. Of course, more on the French side because initially Matt was more, I think adopted by the French community just because that's, the Quebec TV industry works a little bit like that.
Sure.
It just kind of grew from there. What initially started with a lot of local projects and just friends, and that thing happened with Matt, and then it, I had to kind of win over his label, Audiogram, at the time. They, when it came time to do a second label, I think they were very hesitant to allow, an artist that they thought had some potential continue to work with this kind of 20-year-old who had never really done it before on that level.
Ugh.
And Matt was naive enough to say, no, I'm going to do it with my buddy Connor. We're going to, and looking back, I think he also thinks that was super naive, but we connected so much. And yeah,
Those relationships are precious, man. And
it's
sometimes
crazy. Yeah.
I wish people such as labels would not interfere with those things.
Yeah, it's funny. There was kind of a return glorious moment because now, I work with Audiogram all the time.
Right.
But yeah, after that second album came out, which, Quebec Standards did decently well and did its thing, and Matt toured fairly well on that album. We had this moment, me and the label, a year or so afterwards, where they kind of said, hey, we're sorry we didn't trust you, but we're glad that it ended up working the way it
That's
did.
great.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and then from there, it's just been growing and working with as many people that I find interesting. For me, it's just seeking excitement, but mostly people that I love to work with. I think that's number one for me. I don't care what kind of music it is, to be honest. I at home, I listen to like Brazilian jazz most of the time or like old Italian stuff.
Right.
So like it dips all over the place. It's more just finding people to attach to. And I think I've had a couple people that I just, built great relationships with and kind of dig into longer form, formats of work. And yeah, it just kind of grew from there organically.
In that sense, do you feel like what you do applies to any genre, any style, any artist, from what I'm understanding, more so than you see yourself as an X kind of producer.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely like to think of myself as super transparent. That's kind of my goal with every project is I don't really want to exist in the music in the sense that I just want to take whatever the artist is trying to do and try and just make it exponential or blow it up as much as possible. Obviously that I have my tendencies and things that I, tend to lean
that
into.
People hire you for,
hopefully. But yeah, for me, the goal is always just to kind of not exist and to be very transparent. So I think it does allow me at times to dip into other styles of music. But for sure, if you're going to hire me to do a metal album, I'll probably have fun doing it, but it's, I don't jam to metal music that much at home. So, there have been times where I did. And when we were 15 and making, shitty recordings in my parents' basement, I did it. But, now my tendencies, I've started to develop my own personal taste that seems to be lasting a little over time, like the Nick Drake era and Joni Mitchell and late 60s music that just tends to never, somehow it's just, the cycle always comes back.
Always feels good. Yeah.
Always feels good. So for sure I have some natural inclinations, but I'm always open to try new stuff and kind of blend as much as possible.
I always have that conversation with, whether it's like my mix engineer, the person who mixes my songs, pardon me, is Kieran Tom. He's the chief audio engineer for Stingray Music.
Wow, cool.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And I met him through working there. And he's at that stage in his life where he's like, I don't do other things. I just do my job now, and that's what it is. And I like to say I bothered him so much that he caved into working with me.
And then you built a relationship.
Yeah, and now it's this thing where it's like he's like my best friend, and
cool.
We have a problem with mastering engineers because
like finding mastering engineers or the concept of mastering.
The concept of mastering at large, where I feel like, and I think it applies also to a mix engineer.
Sure.
Because for me, it's like I come to it on the angle of science. It almost shouldn't matter what style of music I'm playing. I want you to mix according to the science of it, not the style of music. Like, frequencies, compression, like all of these things, like, EQ. It's a science. It's a technicality that transcends genre.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
And it's like, I want you to mix, like, I could give you a metal song or a blues song. Just mix it properly.
Yeah.
Don't give me a blues sound.
I think the thing about that, though, is that for me, every choice, mixing, mastering, format, like the way everything comes together, it's so much based on the culture and history of music. So, just the way hip hop mixes or neo soul mixes versus folk mixes are approached, it is different. Of course, if I'm a big fan of course, the mindset that the production should be it. You don't want to be changing anything at the mix stage.
Exactly.
But at the same time, knowing that the mixer and mastering people that you're working with, that they have those sensibilities and understand the kind of cultural reason, like why does the snare sound the way it does? Why do we like this kind of a snare? Well, because the Beatles did it this way. And there's kind of like this story of, and why do we use ribbon mics? Well, because we recognize these string sounds from old jazz that we see in movies. Like there's this whole kind of cultural story that's weaved into sounds at this point. So I think as long as that, I agree with you. Of course, it's a technical task, but there does need to be that cultural awareness.
I think so. I think I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I just think it's funny that like, it's like, you send stuff to mix or mastering and there's these liberties that are taken and it's like, man, like the message is already there, dude. Like just...
that's, again, if you're confident in your production and what you're bringing to the table, you're already at 95%. You're just looking for that last 5%. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes, like when we work on so much stuff, especially when it's different genres, sometimes you end up working on something and you're like, yeah, sure. You're at 80% maybe. And you need to rely on your mixer to take you that full way all the way there,
right.
So it sounds like you're really confident in what you're bringing to your mixer.
Yes.
So you don't need anything to be reinvented. You don't need that quarter note delay that he's going to throw on verse 2 because you've already tried it and it doesn't, what I mean?
Exactly. And I think, we had to come to the conclusion that okay, Sasha, you're one of those songwriters where like you're very, very. You should hear what I send to people.
Yeah.
It's very clear. And it's just we come to the conclusion that like, okay, you're probably in a minority in that sense.
Sure.
Where like most people will send stuff and go, help me out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's why people have that reflex to go, oh, let me add this or try this on your thing. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
And, I think it's also the audacity in the sense like, I don't think anybody would do that on a Paul McCartney record.
Yeah. But you never know. There are some situations.
I said no.
But I'm sure there are some relationships where he says, take those liberties because I'm not sure about song 9 on this album.
I'm sure if it was said.
Glue you. Exactly.
If it was said.
But you mean just like immediate liberties? Yeah.
It's like
it's all contextual.
It is. But I just find it like it's hard. Like I get these, masters, and it's like, for instance. And that's another debate, but it's the loudness war of it. Like, I send a mix that is so precise. And then I get this sandwich that has no more dynamics. And they're like, it's great.
It's going to work, yeah.
And it's like, if that's your job, how do you not know this?
You mean like the lack of relevance of loudness at this point with all the... Of course, yeah.
And I understand.
Maybe you're just not working with the right mastering engineer. That might be it, because there are, of course, people that are just that challenge me and sometimes say, "Hey, we don't need to shoot this loud." I love to. I think we were talking on like Instagram. Like, there's so many different people to work with who are so fantastic, men and women all over the place, and some people are just great and will challenge you on those things. I think it's also important, this whole topic of just purely scientific approach. The reality is, these mixers and mastering engineers, when they go home on the weekend, they have albums that they listen to. So their brains are like tuned in.
Tinted,
Everything's contextual. So
that's
why it's so important, I think, to have a variety of people that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if you're, as an artist, it's a different thing because you want to have your team that's kind of locked in. For me, because every week it's like, we're mastering or mixing two different things. It's fun to swap around and see people's different takes. And
your perspective is much more rich in that sense.
Just different. I get to have a bit more liberty, whereas for you, it's like it needs to be precise. You're so close to the vision. For me as the producer, I do have one step away where I can kind of, at the end of the day, my name's on it, but it's somewhere far in the back on the 8th page on the bottom right, so I don't have to carry it on my sleeve the way the artists do.
Sure.
So it gives me a little bit of naive and breathing.
Yeah, man. It's I completely hear you. Whenever I produce stuff that doesn't say mood boards, I'm like, I think it's good. Yeah, we got this.
Yeah.
But for sure, I find it challenging. I mean, I was speaking to Matt. I was speaking to anybody that comes here really, and I noticed that for the most part, they I envy that where some artists are so. Hey man, I'm a singer and I play guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And I want to say I am not a control freak. I have no problems knowing when something is good enough, when it's done, when it's time to share, open, let go. That's not my issue. My thing is just that like it's almost as if I have no choice. Yeah. My vision is that clear.
That's amazing that
I know
do have that clarity. I think for Matt, it's actually, Matt specifically, it's been an interesting journey where initially that was his attitude. It's, I play guitar and sing songs. I love Bob Dylan, and it's pretty clear, I don't need anything fancy. Let's just make it about the music. And then it started to grow into, album 2, let's challenge some things. Let's bring in other musicians. Let's just see where that's going. Album 3, I've got a couple demos I kind of half produced at home. Why don't we build on those and build around it? And now, this 4th album that he's doing, I don't know if he's talking about it, but at this point, he's like really leading it with, one of his musicians, Pietro. And that's been such an interesting journey for him, is finding that clarity and confidence.
Yep.
But there's something beautiful about the naive approach. When somebody can just say, I play guitar and sing, I don't care what mic is up, I don't care, that's an amazing thing because it creates like this super musical opinion. Sometimes we get bogged down. It's so pure, and I'm a huge fan of authenticity and purity. That's like, for me, above anything, is number one.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that naive which I think is a beautiful thing approach, is really fun.
Absolutely.
And like you said, if it doesn't have your name on it, sometimes the fact that you're able to let go
gives you better judgment.
Yeah, better judgment, and allows for like something a little more interesting. You know.
I agree with everything you said, and I'm aware. I'm hyper aware of what you're saying. You know, I've been a music fan and a music nerd and a musician forever, and I take it seriously. Like, I have fun, but I don't have fun.
Yeah, I gotcha.
You know, like,
you challenge things, you try to make it better, you find the best approach. Yeah.
Well, it really started for me like 7 years ago when I got back into music and I decided I wanted to be a songwriter, a producer, because it came with like years of gestating this idea and coming to terms with it and saying, okay, I've tried other things in life. I'm a musician. And I want to be a musician that's still learning and challenging himself at 65.
There you go.
Like, I know some people, I can see history has shown us too that like some people will peak at 30, some people will start working not as hard afterwards. And I'm like, no, I want to be one of those guys.
Just always,
those guys
I'm my biggest critic kind of thing. Yeah.
I want to get better. So for sure, for example, you know, I think of Pink Floyd. I think of Radiohead. I think of all those great artists who happen to be British.
Definitely a trend, yeah.
You know, and it's just this thing where like, yeah, you know, it's the work. It's a 9-to-5 thing, and it's serious. And when I'm there, fun. I get that.
Yeah.
And so I related to that, and I'm aware of all those things, and I try not to let, because it's not about ego. It's really about expression. But it is just this thing where I find it challenging, where some people are, of course, more proficient at, you know, like Matt, singer, songwriter, guitar, you know. Me, I don't have that, and I feel like at this point I'm just like a songwriter, orchestra leader, you know, in that sense. It is more complicated. It's the beauty of having a computer and all this technology, but it's also the other thing where it's like, wow, I wish I could just play acoustic guitar.
Yeah, of course. And it's not everybody who can just, you know, put one mic up, one take, and just commit to it. And,
well, I mean, shit, like, absolutely. And also him and Elliot Gab, you know?
Yeah.
Those guys have voices.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have that. You know,
but that's your opinion, you know, and of course you're your toughest critic, you know.
But I mean,
I'm sure there's maybe a form of that you could find that does have a little more raw approach.
I love my voice,
you know,
but it's just that, you know, I'm not even envious. Like I'm in awe. I love the fact, like when Gabriel sings, it's shit.
Yeah,
it's a thing.
Yeah. It's funny because I find when he sings, it's almost like he's singing to himself, and we get a small little view into it. I don't know if you've ever seen him live or in that, but it's like he's not really performing for anybody else. It's almost like he's doing it for himself. He's so like literally in his body language, he's kind of closed in.
Yes.
Which, you know, I don't know. And then every now and then when he opens up, you kind of get a little peek into his world, and he's like, I'm letting you in just a little bit, you know? And I find something really, you know, intriguing, mysterious about that. And I think it's part of his charm.
You know, it's really funny that you zoomed in on that specific thing.
Why?
Because I noticed it.
Yeah, that's
and I was
funny.
thinking the same thing somehow. I was like, that posture is indicative of something. I didn't overthink it, but I was thinking that, yeah.
There's so many layers, and I think everything is Freudian or connected.
Sure.
There's a reason for everything.
And I wanted to ask before I forget, what is your instrument?
I guess at the core, it's guitar, especially in a writing sense. When I'm producing and let's say playing and producing at the same time, I love playing bass. I just find it such a cool way to connect with, because I love doing, you know, a lot of musicians together at the same time. Right. It's like a big thing of a lot of stuff that I like to do. Playing bass is just so much fun because you're like have great rapport with like the drummer and rhythmic focus, and at the same time you can still kind of lead into harmonic ideas and communicate with everybody and do fun chord changes. There's something about playing bass that's just so fun. But that's on a writing level, it's guitar for sure.
Right. That's a very astute producing comment.
Yeah.
The bass guitar thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I'll remember that next time I'm in that situation.
It's also a bit easy at times.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I'm producing, and I love actually playing bass, being at the computer and producing. If we don't have an engineer on the project, there's something about it. It's like I have time to think while you're still playing. Not always, you know, it depends on the context and music, of course, but it's a little. I don't want to say easy because it's not, but you know
it's
what
easy
I mean.
for you.
Yeah. That's it. It comes naturally for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's fun, and that's a more recent thing actually. Yeah, it's interesting.
Let's get into it, man.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, in no particular order, en ordre alphabétique. So there's Charlotte Cardin. That's the song Drive.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's fun to jump through songs because I think it can show also just how differently implicated you can be in artist music, and especially the power of teams. I think that's a lot of what I do is, every artist case, it's about building the team of musicians and delegating, and I love that. And I think just the chance to jump through different songs shows like, oh, actually I'm like not that implicated, but of course, there's that element of bringing it all together.
Your presence changes something, even if, quote unquote.
Even if it's at 10%,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also because I just love working with artists that are very self-sustainable, that bring a lot to the table, that show up with 60% demos. That's when I'm not writing, of course.
Right.
I love that. I love to just help people kind of push to the last little finish line, whatever that is. It's a hard thing to do sometimes. Anyways.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
I saw you driving by.
Now, what can you tell us about this song in your capacity?
Yeah, so it started actually Marc-André Gilbert, who produced a lot of the newer music for Charlotte, and good friend. He had this kind of, sub-bass sampled groove, just this very basic thing, which was originally, oh my God, why am I not thinking of the Lee Fields sample, which we didn't know at first, which was something we had to deal with later on. But it was really just this kind of looping beat, and Charlotte and Jason Brando at the time just kind of put together the bones of what was this song. It was interesting because when you have something so minimal and not many elements, to find those elements to build can be challenging.
Sure.
So it ended up being, of course, me and Charlotte, like a lot of focus on vocal production and layers that help you just kind of move through the song. And then as like a buzzer beater moment, of course, we needed to clear that sample with the team, but we didn't end up using the sample, and I kind of replayed all the guitars, and we found kind of alternate versions. Although it is still, Lee Fields and team still has publishing actually on the song, even though we changed it. So it was a big moment of learning about musical interpolation and just that whole world, especially when it's on a major label. It's pretty crazy, the politics and approval.
For sure, yeah.
But yeah, at first we didn't know there was a sample, and last minute we flagged it and had to chat with their team, and it was a bit of a journey. So yeah, but Charlotte, I think this was actually the lead vocal is a one take, maybe third demo take she did after it was written.
So she came in
booth.
with the actual take.
Yeah, literally, I think maybe we might have patched in one or two words, probably actually in this section right now.
First of all, I'm sorry to ask a basic question. Were you guys in the same room when this was being done, or
vocals? Yeah, absolutely. This was all done like in a small booth up at Cult Nation. But yeah, I think we ended up keeping her demo tape.
Got it.
Second run through here's where I'm at kind of thing.
Because it had the feel and
crazy. She's like one of the few artists that has that capacity and is that talented. But yeah, the musical concept stemmed really from Mag, and then of course we had to kind of redo some elements. But interesting learning with this song.
When you're in the studio with someone like Charlotte, who obviously knows how to sing, or rather, she has a beautiful voice. What was your, so there's this person, you guys are doing takes, you're telling me she already brought a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So what's that like in that sense? Like at that moment, you're obviously giving that artist some space, and you're just how clear is she on what's a good take, and how much input does she need from what in any case in that situation?
Yeah, so vocal production in general, I think it's like my absolute favorite thing to do.
Okay.
I like, for me, I like to think is one of my greatest strengths because I love connecting with the artists on that level. And I also really think that music is like 80% songwriting and vocals and vocal production, and that music is in some ways secondary on a production level. I think you can just do so much with vocal layering. You know, at this point, Charlotte and I had worked quite a bit together. We had done like a bunch of demos for what ended up being the new album, you know, that Mag and Jason really led the production on. But at that point, we had a really great relationship where we had done so many demos together that there, you know, a bit of a trust building where, of course, when it comes to the lead vocal, like she kind of just does her thing. She's just so good. But then, of course, when it comes to the layering and building things up, that's just this back and forth. How about this? And what about this harmony? And we're kind of all just shooting ideas back and forth. And it's just this kind of fun, wild, creative thing. And okay, how does it feel if we're putting 14 double layers? And you know, this song is obviously heavily layered.
I'm sorry, say that again? 14 double layers?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I love doing that. I mean, it's like classic R&B stuff where you have 4 doubles that are, you know, similar energy, 4 doubles that are whispered, and finding a beautiful balance of all of those things. Love going so deep in vocal production.
We're going to have to talk about that afterwards.
Sure.
'Cause, I have a different approach.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear.
And this song is called Passive Aggressive. I'm less familiar, pardon me, with her repertoire.
Sure.
How old is this song?
Passive Aggressive was the first single off of Phoenix, which is her album right now.
Right.
I think it came out close to a year now. I think it was
Okay, that's that song. Yeah.
end of last year.
Yeah.
But was written and initially produced in 2018. Like I think this was the first demo that we had put together. We'd just been spending so much time in studio looking for ideas. Me, Jason, Charlotte, so many, and eventually Mag as well, of course. And when we finally had this bass line and just these chords, it finally sparked something in Charlotte. She went into the other room and wrote basically the entire song. But yeah, it was an old demo that went through a number of iterations to get where it is now.
And how did, again, like in that capacity, what was your contribution in terms of like producing?
Yeah, so initially it was really like the composition. So, you know, me and Jason had been like listening to all these like old school 2000s Mario hits, and we were just trying to figure out what is the vibe.
You guys are the worst.
Yeah. Anyway, so then this, you know, I forget who was playing the chords, and then I came up with this bass line. It kind of built from there. And then we had this initial version that was a little bit more live, a little bit grungier, a little bit more my tendencies for sure.
Sure.
And then Mag came in and brought more of the 80s flair and, you know, the digital bass and like the Juno synth that comes in the last chorus. So yeah, the production really developed quite a bit when Mag came in. But yeah, it started with that initial composition and moment where we're at Studio d'Endurant, and yeah, and I think we kept some of the elements of the back vocal production, but she ended up redoing the vocals a year later. This is one of those songs that had a long journey to get where it is.
I believe she's also about your age.
She's, I think, 2 years younger. Yeah, she's
Jesus
25,
Christ.
maybe 24. I'm not sure. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, she's so talented.
It's interesting how she, you know, her voice is already so fully formed.
It's crazy. It's honestly, it's an insane thing to watch her just do a take through a song where we're not splitting things up by section, and just perform her natural tendencies and runs. It's like superhuman in some ways. She's really incredible. And yeah, it's fun. I think we'll have 1 or 2 contexts where really raw things will come out for her soon. That, you know, there's one song in particular that we wrote together with Jason that's essentially like a Billie Holiday kind of jazz thing. And for me, I love that version of Charlotte. I love the just super authentic, here's any mistakes and cracks in my voice and the guitar fucks up. And I just love that. I love that with all artists, but specifically with her because of just the raw talent.
And let me ask you, how did it come about that you got involved with her?
I'd like to say I kind of forced my way in a little bit.
Fair enough.
I was a big fan, was working, I had a studio at the Cult Nation Studios at the time, which is her label. And yeah, it was kind of a family affair, just getting to know the team there. And there were, at that time, it was before we were started to work on what became Phoenix, she was kind of in this limbo phase where there were a couple demos floating around and nobody seemed to be able to crack the code on finishing them. There's one called Double Shifts that I did. And yeah, I kind of like said, I'm going to take a stab at it. Here we go. And kind of pushed my way in. And it led to a couple of songs that we ended up doing together. Double Shifts, I think, being the first that we did together, and then Drive, which of course was a team effort. But yeah, it was interesting. I really wanted to work with her. I was such a big fan, and it was an honor.
Does she? And I say this, maybe you don't even know. I'm sorry. I'm asking a really simple question. Because she seems to be able to play the keyboards real well. Yep. And she's obviously singing well, and I guess she writes all of her own lyrics, or most of it.
Combination. I think her and Jason write a lot together, and the fruits of this album is very much the two of them together.
Because I get a sense that left to her own devices, she could figure it all out because she has all the basic tools to make fire. In that sense.
Well, that's it.
And then I guess she surrounds what I'm sort of getting at is I'm assuming she then surrounds herself with the people to complete the vision. Yeah. But she doesn't, I mean to say that some artists, you have to do a lot of work for them. Where some people come in with a lot of work already. Yeah.
I think it's a combination. And that's, especially in this album, there's songs that are really these are Charlotte's songs. She wrote piano and vocal, and let's just take it to the finish line. And then I think there's also a lot of songs where Mag came in with concepts, and that kind of developed into, helping her write in a different context that was out of her own natural tendencies. But of course, I mean, the raw talent that's there is undeniable. But I think it was nice that through this process of the album, she really opened her process up, and became more open to what happens from other people's ideas. And I think her partnership with Jason also really allowed her to just try new things. And I think the album shows that there's a lot of different genres that they explored.
I put a Claudia Bouvette song.
Cool.
Because time is flying by so fast. She's someone whose repertoire I'm least familiar with.
Okay.
And it's funny because I've seen those people live.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, and how did that collaboration come about?
Yeah, similarly, we actually met through the kind of Cult Nation family at the time. And then Claudia and I just kind of developed this relationship. And we had another third producer, Bo Diakowicz, who was heavily involved at that time in this first EP we did. So I was actually in London at the time working with Bo. We had just spent a couple days together and just kind of firing out concepts, almost on a beat maker kind of thing, which is not usually what I do. And we were literally just took 3 days and just 5, 6, 7 concepts a day. Wow. And this is one that kind of came out, I think it was our last 30 minutes of the stretch. And we just had this OB6 old synth and just these 2 samples and the little chimes, and it came together in minutes, and we ended up kind of just writing the song later, at least writing vocally to it, lyrically to it, me and Claudia later on. But yeah, Claudia and I just developed this kind of friendship and relationship through just trying stuff out, and it was a big project for me of just trying stuff, limitless. She was open to everything, so it really got to allow me to scratch the itch of a lot of different things and ultimately find out what worked for us and what worked for her.
And what did you do on this song? What was your contribution, so to speak, on that?
It's a bit of everything. So I mean, all the lyrics Claudia and I wrote together, and vocal production, and then Bo and I together put kind of the core of the music together. So that main synth I was playing on OB6 while he had a kick sample going, and
this was done in your studio at Cult Nation?
No, initially this was done mostly in London. The core music was done there.
Got it.
And then Claudia and I wrote and probably did vocal production at Cult at the time.
Got it. And when you're doing vocal production, I assume you're doing it with the artist?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. So
it's one of those parts.
Yeah, it's the same kind of scenario where we're looking for magic and looking for responding back vocal hooks and just all these other things to kind of flesh out the full vision of the song. Yeah, Claudia's amazing. She just kind of like never-endingly shoots ideas. You can just she'll like ad lib all day. So if you're lacking inspiration, she's got something comes up. You know.
Cool. I follow her on Instagram, and it's like she feels like she's always at summer camp.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
She's always just living her best life.
Yeah, and it's really true. Like she's always in a good mood. Like it's so fun to work with somebody like that. You know, it's always going to be a good time. You know, and
right on.
You know,
that's important, man, because sometimes people can be really miserable.
Totally, yeah. It's a hard process. Yeah. So her like loose and just everything can work attitude is like fun. If you feel like, you know, there's some projects where you feel kind of limited and you're afraid to try certain things. With her, it's like, let's try everything and just see what we're most excited about.
Right.
Which is fun.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's nasty.
Funny enough, this is actually like a sister song to the previous one. So it's like the same drum sounds deliberately, literally the same samples, lyrically kind of a play off the story. It's like the ex-boyfriend's voice that she's taking in this song. So it's kind of responding to the previous song, which is kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I love those like meta things that kind of are internal artist things. That,
telling stories, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fun for, you know, just fans who do want to dig in to kind of hear those stories and find those other connections.
Absolutely.
Even in the bridge, we take the hook lyric from Cool It, the previous song, and it's the bridge, but like with slightly altered lyrics.
Now you know, now you know.
Yeah. Love that stuff.
I love this.
It's fun. It's been a while since I've actually listened through this stuff, you know? It's cool to go down memory lane and just remember the moments, you know? Like, I love, like, having the artist contribute as much as production as possible, and I think there's, like, some of the verse, like, percussion. Claudia was, like, trying to show me this idea on FaceTime, like, with her nails for the rhythm, so I just, like, voice noted it through FaceTime, took the nails, and, like, that's literally her nails on a...
Sick.
That's like the hook from the previous song. But yeah, literally like took that and try to integrate as much of them in.
You mean what I'm hearing right now?
In the verse, there's like percussion that's literally her nails on her desk at home, you know?
Sick.
I love that stuff.
I know. I don't know her, but I mean, I've seen her on Instagram. She plays guitar, I believe.
Yeah, she's like really getting into it now, which is fun. Like at the chorus, she plays a little bit of synth live, and but she's really like I find she's an incredible performer. Like when she's on stage, she's literally like a child at camp, like just freaking out and really hypes the crowd. And yeah, now she's playing more guitar, and there's more guitar in the new songs we're, you know, writing and producing right now. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see people develop when you get to work on one or two bodies of work with them, you know?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's a growing relationship.
Totally. It's hard sometimes, but it's really fun sometimes too.
I bet. So tell me about this artist and tell me about this song.
Yeah, so my manager, Lori Lee, at the time we weren't working together for management, we were just good friends, and she showed me this artist, Gray, who I initially thought from the UK, was actually based in Ontario. Super whispery
London,
voice.
Ontario.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, and this is actually the first time we met. We wrote this song with our friend Ali Milner. Yeah, and she's always had this kind of like R&B-esque blues form nature to her voice, so that's what this was. And I think like West Coast from Lana Del Rey had recently come out, so I was super into like big tempo changes, like dropping here.
Ooh, okay.
So I love those like major flips where it's just like, oh, we're going somewhere totally new.
Is that a tempo change or it's really just halftime?
No, this was a full tempo change.
Okay.
We dropped like 30 BPM or something.
Okay, wow.
And to be honest, production-wise, at this point, this was 2 years ago probably when we were producing this, in this hot little, literally closet in Toronto. It was just like the worst studio I've ever been.
Nice.
But I was kind of like making fun of trap. Like I never make trap, so I just like pulled out what to me were like joke trap samples, and then like New Jack Swing, Michael Jackson samples in the verses, like that snare.
Got it.
And then it kind of just ended up being like, hey, we kind of like it, so we just ended up keeping it. I love comedy and music and doing things ironically. So sometimes I'm making fun of something, and it's like, oh no, that's actually kind of fun, you know? like using that trap clap. You know, to me it's like ridiculous to do it, but it works out at the end.
It's interesting because it now it really highlights it even more. The comment you said earlier, where like being a producer, you have a distance from the work.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to live with it so close to yourself, and that is something that I guess I would struggle with a little bit, you know, because
as an artist, you mean you would struggle to have that distance?
As a, you know what, I would even say just as myself, as Sasha, as a human being, like some things, if I don't, like I can do things, but it's almost as if like you just said, you know, you can do them with a sense of humor and you can do them a little like quote unquote ironically.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that disparagingly, you know?
Yeah.
I think I would struggle with that. You know?
So for me, like the inspiration to do all of that is like just loving Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, geeking out over podcasts with, you know, with film directors who use cultural items and points and special moments ironically in their films. Like that's what Quentin Tarantino is. He's doing everything over the top, you know, like
very
the
referential,
crazy, super referential, super over the top strings. But the fact that we know that he's aware that it's crazy, to me makes it very cool.
Right.
I love doing that musically. Like the phaser that we just heard on the intro of this song. It's like, it's so not my taste, but then I probably did it as a joke, and it's like, oh, it's kind of Tame Impala-y, or gives that kind of flavor,
right.
You know?
Yeah.
And then it just makes me smile, you know? I love things that just make me smile and aren't so serious all the time.
It's funny that you would say filmmakers, because Robert was here 2 days ago.
Cool.
And he sees himself as a filmmaker.
Wow.
When I asked him, you know, what's the hat he's wearing, he said he's not a producer, he's not a songwriter, he's a filmmaker.
Wow.
Right?
So it's just that he looks at his music as some derivative of a film, or like that's how he identifies himself, or
what exactly was he saying? Was that like for him, it has to do with storytelling and references and that detachment from it.
So cool. I so agree with that, because like I said, the reason the snare sounds the way it does has a history, and I find with great films it's so similar. You know, everything Quentin does, there's some kind of a niche reference to you know.
And if you don't know it, you don't even fathom that it's a reference.
Yeah. But then if you dig in, it's like his awareness of that is just so deep, and his knowledge is so deep. So I love it.
I'm not gonna lie, I do watch sometimes videos on the internet of like really horrible nerds that can't speak properly, that are gonna dissect his movies or anybody's movies. You know, it's like, oh, you're just like a real movie buff.
Yeah. I'm definitely not on that level. I think what I connect with is like the passion that these people have. It's like when I watch Chef's Table, I literally cry every episode. It's just like, I find it just so moving to see people passionate. And it's the same thing about what we're talking about with connecting with artists. And it doesn't really matter about the genre or what it is. Just when somebody is so deeply passionate, for me, it's exciting to be working with them.
I have to agree. I really understand that part for sure. Like, I think that can transcend any hesitation I might have. You know, being in a room with someone and then like emotions are flying high and something's on the table.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's the other thing, is when you're producing other people's music, sometimes you don't necessarily like the idea, but if you see the artist reacting to it, you fly with it, and then all of a sudden I end up falling in love with it, you know, and just I try to stay open-minded so that, you know, oh no, I don't think this is gonna work, but the artist is like, wait, can we go a little bit further with it? If I follow them on the journey, I usually end up falling in love with it too.
I know what you mean. There's another thing, man, like some people don't try things because they're, you know, you get like when you're afraid of it not working, or just, I've been in working environments where it's like, after like 20 seconds of a take, someone's like, no, we're going to stop. It's like, no, let's
work it out.
Let's go to the end of that idea.
Totally.
Because otherwise we're never going to know if it works or not.
Of course.
And your hesitation, or maybe you're shy or you're embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not conducive to learning.
Totally.
You know?
But of course there is a limit to that on the other side. Not to always play devil's advocate, but
please.
You know, I love working with Simon Angel, who's previously the guitarist for Pat Watson, and of course is you know one of the two partners of Thus Owls, or 3 partners with Sam Joly and his wife Erica, Simon's wife. When you work with somebody like Simon or Robbie Kuster from the Pat Watson Gang, they have such a they're so connected to their best performances. So when you're doing a take with Simon, for example, and he's just, kind of going off in his own zone, he's really wacky and really crazy. After 3 takes, he'll usually look at us and say, there's nothing left in the tank. Like, that was it. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not a scripted part. Like, these are like kind of off the wall geniuses who are so connected to their instrument that just vomit stuff everywhere. Mm-hmm. And they're so connected to when things are working that it's fun to know what those limits are and knowing, okay, but now we're kind of killing this idea. We're ruining the magic.
Sure, absolutely.
And just, Simon and Robbie specifically are just the best. They're so talented.
And now who are we listening to?
So this is Katie Tupper. We actually just, put this song out very recently, this week actually.
Right, I saw that.
So she recently signed to Arts and Crafts, and her and I met on Zoom like last year and just started writing songs.
That's it.
Too many songs, and this was one of them that came out of those sessions. And luckily, we managed to bring her out to the Treehouse Studio up north, which me and Dave LaFleche have up in St. Adele.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Super fun spot. So she came out. We brought a fun gang of musicians and just like chasing that D'Angelo deep neo-soul thing. But it's fun to do it with a female voice, with still like heavy drums and heavy bass and like, again, vocal layers, loose vocal layers that are all over the place and calculatedly loose in the D'Angelo sense.
Yeah.
Super fun process. I love her.
And are you doing more producing or actually co-writing on this song?
In this, all the music we've been writing, it's been co-writing to the most part. Every now and then she has 1 or 2 songs that we just produce.
Right.
But she's heavily implicated in the production as well.
Got
This
it.
was more, musical concepts, and then she wrote to it. But we're adapting melodies together. I think we really see each other as kind of writing partners.
Got it.
Yeah, she's a badass. She's so cool, and her voice is so deep. It's so fun to indulge in like a low, heavy voice.
Right. And is this sequence drums? Is that a drummer?
This is live, yeah. So this is Sam Joly. Of course, we've got like some little hi-hat samples and things floating on top. But at the core, this is a 1-take live performance of me, Sam, and Emile Farley playing bass. I'm also like playing bass in the verses, like bass chords and stuff.
So let me ask you, in a session like this, are you the guy setting up the mics, doing all the patching, checking, and I'm assuming there's pre-production before you record?
Yeah. So I mean, the
So
writing
walk me through
process
that.
between me and Katie was very much, we building initial demos and me kind of fleshing out like full rhythms and understanding where it's all going to go, bass parts, and really everything's quite scripted. But then we kind of throw a lot of it out the door. Okay, we know we like these 3 samples from the demo, and then we just have the band kind of play over the track. Sometimes, it's not working anymore, let's just start from scratch, let's bump it up 5 BPM. For her specifically, because we want a live band kind of feel, we're very quick to throw any pre-prod out the door and just rebuild with humans in the room. But yeah, the way I like to have the Treehouse structured, and I think Dave as well, is it's kind of plug and play. Like, drums are always patched, bring your stuff, but it's like we get there pretty quickly. So for sure, I'm engineering as well. I mix this as well, but I like to just get into it real quick. Like, it was more getting into the creative.
It feels like that must be challenging because you have to be in the moment with the musicians, but you're also the guy who's hyper aware of like, your meters and your things and whatever. Yeah,
there's definitely a bit of that, but I'd rather compromise anything technical over the vibe. So, us having a good time, Sam having fun in the booth, and Katie feeling like we're on the right path, that's priority for me. Mm-hmm. If a mic falls halfway through the take, but we like the take, we keep it and I'll figure it out,
Sick.
I'm way more of that attitude. So, of course, but it's also me showing up the day before and planning some things in advance and doing that 10-hour setup so that when we're there, we're ready to fly.
Yeah. So you are showing up in advance and are setting things up. And,
of course. And planning different things. Of course, there's a lot of,
I ask because sometimes people just assume, there's a little bit of magic or things just happen, which is not the case. You're going there in advance, you're working hard, and you're putting the shit together.
Yeah, of course, I tend to downplay it a lot, but it's, trying, okay, so what mics are working with Sam? Let's put him in the tiny booth. It's literally in a vocal booth because that's how, the Roots would do it back in the day. And Questlove was playing in like a super low ceiling, tight room. So just like, of course, I'm thinking about all those things and planning with Sam, like, okay, what kind of snares? Can you send me a voice note of like 4 different snares you have at home? Give me a rim shot so I can kind of imagine what it's going to be. Like, there's so much of that conversation in advance.
I never heard someone even saying, send me those snare sounds. And do you take notes? Do you have notes on the day before?
Totally, yeah. Like I'm a Google Sheet like geek,
Right.
Everything's pretty mapped out. I do so much prep work in advance so that when I'm there, it doesn't look like there's any prep work and I'm just kind of like having fun in the moment because I don't want to be doing that while we're talking about, well, I'm not sure about this lyric in the hook. Like that's something that happens while we're getting the drum take, So I try to be as much free of mind. And now, when of course there's the budget and we're working on big albums or long form albums, I love to work with an engineer who's there so that they can take over a lot more of that work. So I love working with Charles-Émile Baudin and of course Ghislain-Luc Lavigne whenever we can. I trust them both so much that it's like I get to just be, writing charts and just being on the creative side because I know that when I come in the booth and because I'm in the live room, let's say playing bass, when I come in the booth I know that we're on the same page and we have those conversations beforehand.
That's I'm happy to hear you say that because that's how I work too. Like everything is done in advance so that when me and my friends show up to work it has to be because I ask because everybody works differently and, it's nothing's a given.
Of course. And sometimes when you're writing, producing, especially with like Zoom sessions, a lot of it, there's no prepping. It's just we're doing whatever happens. But in the cases like of most of the music we're playing here, there's a lot of thinking and calculation and redoing stuff. And,
It's good because I want people to know that. So, ça c'est les Sœurs Boulay.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
We've just been friends for a long time. I think we actually met through Elliot Maginot, through Gab, because he used to live with Steph at the time, 4 years ago. And we I think I did a writing camp with Steph at SoCan 3 or 4 years ago now. Just kind of hit it off. So I did the last album with them. And then this was one of the first songs they had written after kind of a crazy year of political, cultural conflict, Me Too. Just, they've had similar to Sefia, and not to equate with Sefia, but they've had a tricky year. They're heavily involved in a lot of stuff and kind of always at focus in the media. So this was one of the first songs they wrote, just them. We actually called Robbie to kind of come in, and it was a bit of an ad hoc process. Not so much let's get a band and play it as musicians, which had been, the typical process. This was a little more reverse engineered. We weren't sure what it was going to be. So we had Mel playing that piano part and working on song structure, and then Robbie kind of came afterwards and just showed up with all his weirdo drums and building backwards. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd process for this song specifically.
I love this song.
Yeah, I mean, they're just such great writers, and they only write something if it means something to them. So it's fun to be, music is fun for music's sake, but when it's really means something to them and it's a message that they want to share, it's fun to work on that. You feel really motivated to work on it.
Sure, and I mean, especially for those girls, I'm assuming their first and foremost strength is their lyrics and their voices.
100%.
So naturally, it would make sense that they're not just like throwing some shit out there that doesn't mean anything.
Of course. Yeah. I just love them. They're both so open-minded. We listen to so much similar music, and we have such a healthy conversation of challenging stuff. Like, I love when they challenge stuff, and I think they like when I challenge stuff. Sometimes you have that relationship with people where you feel like you're constantly being challenged and it doesn't make you feel good. But with us, it's like, I know when they're challenging me, it's because they want it to be better. Or if I'm challenging something, it's like, how can we make this that little bit better?
It doesn't come from the ego.
No, zero ego.
Yeah.
And we're just great friends. We've become great friends through the process. I love just chatting with them. And, Mel is having a second kid now, too. So they're at a different pace than other artists. They're, they love what they do, but they have a healthy distance from it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can play the Elliot Maginot.
I'm not sure, actually.
Fair enough.
I'd love to,
Yeah.
especially that song, because it's a very special one for him and I on the album. That kind of.
But it's really not that much of a big deal in a sense where I've him and Matt, I've both spoken to them and have had their songs here, but we can definitely speak on it. I want to actually speak on. Let me get personal here about Gabriel. I met him through a JP.
Cool.
And I also have a special story now with that record,
Wow, please tell me.
Well, it's really fucked up. It's because so I had written to him because I met him at JP's birthday 2-3 years ago.
Cool.
And just a nice guy, just a good vibe. And I remember just laughing a lot with him. So
funny, man. He's just
he's
always
hilarious.
laughing when I'm with Gab. Yeah.
And so I didn't feel contrived to just text him and say, hey, man, would you like to come on the podcast? And he graciously came. And then I really got into I love that song, Holy Father. For me, that song is the jam.
I'm so happy.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's one of those songs where I could say, damn, I wish I wrote that.
Wow.
For sure.
It's Gab. So talented, man.
Bar none, that song is fucked up. And I know it's very different from everything else he does.
Yep.
But that doesn't matter. It's just a solid, special song. And then I was supposed to go see him live for his album launch with my girl. And then we ended up having a horrible breakup.
Oh, no.
Horrible, world-shattering breakup.
So sorry to hear that.
We're back together now, folks. So it's all been working out.
Good.
But when I invited her, and it was going to be our first show post-pandemic where shows were being back.
Yeah, it was the first show I went to, actually, that album launch. Yeah.
Likewise.
Cool.
And she ended up going, but without me, with someone else.
No way.
Yeah.
So bittersweet.
And I remember she was there, and I was there with my pops, and it was prop.
This was in the breakup,
that
moment.
Oh
you
yeah,
weren't together.
we were not speaking, and I gotta say it was one of the worst nights of my life. I'm not even joking.
Don't tell Gab.
It was crazy, and and it was sort of fucked up because I was so happy to go see him and JP and V2.
Yeah,
and it just became this surreal thing. And then of course the album was launched that day, and it's on my almost daily rotation. And
that's so cool to hear.
Yeah, it's just I love how records have stories. That's the whole thing of it. And it sounds like a shitty story, but it's not. I love that story, and it's important. And we're back together. And
it's so interesting though that of course it's going to be hard for you to ever disassociate that night.
Yeah.
When you hear that one song and you saw her on the the
yeah,
downstairs
and
floor.
I
whatever,
spoke to the guy, and we spoke about that song, and it was just
every time I hear this marimba riff, I just think about that terrible night. Yeah, that's funny.
Absolutely. And yeah, he's just one of those guys who is so talented.
Yeah.
And,
so I think this whole album was very much an example of how much he brought to the table in terms of initial demos. Of course, I think we probably redid everything and kept, a couple piano or a couple oddball sounds, but Gab really did a lot of work in advance and had, he had this kind of wild vision of, working with a lot of instruments that he didn't know, bringing in, West African Senegalese musicians to
that was
play
a lot of
kora
work on his part to sort of.
And it was a lot of work to make it all work and feel appropriate in the context. And but it was such a fun challenge. And, Gab and I, we had done the previous record together, so we're just so close. And so it was a very fun challenge. And I think, in some songs it just really clicked and really connected, and then some, we had to iterate and challenge, and Gab just did so much work to make that happen. But it was fun because we really indulged in a lot of noise. It's a very like analog, noisy album. There's a lot of like effects, like not effects, but there's a lot of like nature sounds and stuff that kind of
we
weave
spoke
in.
about that,
and I absolutely love that, and Gab does as well. So I remember re-listening to the masters. There's one song called Dead Church, and over the bridge there's this flute solo played by Lasso, and I listened to the master, and it's almost like 80% noise, and I could barely hear the music. And just realizing how deep we went into that zone. And I think that's cool, it's just fun. But every now and then I'm like, oh man, maybe that was a bit too much. But that's the charm of the album, we were there at the time. So
I think you have to go to those places to know where the limits are.
Totally. Yeah.
And both Matt and Gab spoke to me about the fact that you're very sort of raw in your approach, and that you'll leave bleed and you'll just leave things in. And tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how did you get to the point where you're like, fuck it, it's all good? Because it's a process. You weren't just born like that.
I think it's also, I started like initially when I was recording stuff, it was so fragmented, multi-track, digital, doing that for so long, which always felt like you're kind of chasing authenticity. And then having a couple moments where you work on some songs, Matt and I have had a bunch of moments like that. I think with a lot of artists now, there have been a lot of those moments where just authenticity just works when it's just simple and everybody's in the room, and you kind of learn to embrace those mistakes and the weird quiver in the voice, or that lamp that fell down halfway through the take, but we love the take, so let's just leave it in.
Right.
So I think just, when you just work on so much music, and then at a certain point you go home and you're cooking dinner and you're, listening to stuff or listening to what you worked on that day, which I do not that much of, but at the end it's like, well, for some reason that authentic take with the lamp that fell over, it feels so much better while I'm cooking and actually enjoying music as a human being and not as a professional music maker.
Producer, yeah.
So then I just realized, like, every time we leave those special moments in, and not to do it deliberately, no, don't push over the lamp so it falls so you have an authentic moment,
Yeah.
But for some reason, it feels better and it feels great, and it feels more reminiscent of the albums that we used to hear, and not over-tuning everything and not over-editing everything, but rather looking for those magic moments in the room. When it happens or not. And I think the song that we were going to play, Emilio, is the perfect example of that, where it's just, there's, so many spots where Matt, the drummer for Gab, is, hitting weird rim shots that the snare disappears on a 4 every now and then, but it just feels so good. I can literally see Matt smiling in the take when I hear that song, and us doing the trumpet layers and the sax layers and all that fun stuff. And, at the beginning, I think the take ends with, and that's why it ended up becoming called Emilio, because I literally walked into the room. I was like, guys, that was insane. Emilio, just yelling this. And then as a joke, Emilio.
No way, because that's exactly what I hear when I hear Emilio.
Yeah, exactly. And as a joke, we were hanging out.
That I know this.
And Emil literally said to Gab, hey, you should call the song Emilio. And Gab literally looked at him and said, yeah, okay, why not? And then named the song Emilio.
We're talking about the Night at the Roxbury thing here.
I don't know. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I've seen Night at the Roxbury, but it's been a few years. So.
Why did you say Emilio when you walked in?
Oh, literally, because Emil was playing bass, and I call him Emilio.
Oh, man.
But is that a Night at the Roxbury
Night at the Roxbury
reference?
thing, because it's like they're standing in line, and then they're like bothering these girls behind them, Will Ferrell and the other guy, I forget his name. And they're like, man, and so I was standing in line, and there he was, the Mighty Ducks man himself, Emilio Estevez. And I was just like, Emilio!
No way. I didn't even know this reference.
Yeah,
that's
dude.
so funny.
That ruined that name for me.
Wow, that's hilarious. Oh my God, I got to tell Gab. He's going to love that story.
I wanted to approach that subject because I know that like so many musicians, so many artists, so many creative people, in that creative pursuit, perfection is something we think is demanded of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect vocal take, perfect guitar tone, perfect recording, perfect levels, perfect environment. And that's why I want to talk about it, because you're that proof, you know, and I'm an advocate for that too. And I just want to let people who are listening know nothing has to be perfect. You know, it's all about the intention and how it's delivered in the end.
Totally. Yeah. I kind of developed an entire project right now that I'm just in the kind of moment of wrapping up at this point. It's an album called 1969. I asked a bunch of friends to come and co-write or write songs for the project, and it's very Nick Drake, Joni Mitchell inspired. And yeah, I called up 12 friends to kind of contribute to this project.
Wow.
And the genesis of it was very much that, chasing authenticity. It's the entire album is basically classical guitar and string arrangements with, you know, a couple cheating moments of Mellotron and some fun stuff. But very much, it's all original music, but very much chasing exactly that, realizing that every time we do these live takes, something special is happening. So the entire album is basically that. So, and it's super odd, you know. Elisa P and I wrote a song, and that she wrote lyrically in Inuk, and it's just 5 minutes of us just, and it dips away, and most of it was recorded outside, and it's been a quite monstrous endeavor and just logistically make happen, but it's been a super fun project and super inspiring, and
that's crazy.
Very much in the ethos of what we're talking about. Chasing authenticity and mistakes and just letting things be what they are, you know, and letting it be real. No tuning. There's like not really any EQ or compression on the album too. It's all ribbon mics, just Seidel engineering. And so, I'm definitely heavily in pursuit of exactly what we're talking about constantly, you know.
Wrapping up, man, I want to ask you this. I have 2 more questions for you. I always like to know, what is the hardest part of the creative process for you? What is something you struggle with that you're aware of and that you're trying to make better, or at the very least that you know you're struggling with?
Yeah, it's so funny because it just changes with every context. I think it's mostly just it's a very good question that I don't think about enough.
And it's okay. It's okay if you don't have a...
No, but of course there are things. I think sometimes it's a lot about just proficiency in theory and wanting to push things further. It's something I always kind of fight with myself about, that I need to invest more time in. Although I have put a lot of time into it, because it opens doors creatively on so many levels. I don't know. It's very tricky. It's funny to even think about that question.
I get it. And I want to know, lastly, I understand that you work at a studio called the Treehouse.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit of how that came about for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So 7 or 8 years ago, David Laflèche built this beautiful treehouse in Saint-Adèle. The building was there, but you know he built out this beautiful studio there. And at the time, he was still a musical director for La Voix and a bunch of TV shows before he started his artist career as well. And he just didn't find himself using the studio that much, which was such a shame. And we ended up working on some projects together. I helped him on his personal record. We had produced a couple artists together, so we just kind of became close. I'd done parts of Matt's album there 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So just always loved the space. And I'd been coming off a year that creatively was very tough, actually. You know, thinking about the previous question, I think it's just creating without limitation and sometimes putting boxes on myself. I think that's part of it. You know, sometimes, you know...
Getting out of your own way?
Yeah, that, and also just classifying things too much. Sometimes you do that and then you're stunting potential. So I need to stop doing that and just like let things be what they are. And really trust the artist's vision. Anyways, all that to say, I kind of re-met Dave. You know, we'd known each other a little bit, but we re-met 3 years ago to work on his project and another friend's project. And, you know, he wasn't sure what the status of the treehouse was. He didn't know if he wanted to keep it. And I kind of just said, Dave, you have to keep this place. This is a sanctuary for me. I'd come off of a year of tougher work. I was just a little hard on myself. And lacking some inspiration. And then when I found the treehouse and started spending time there and just spending that time with Dave there, who's become, you know, a mentor and a brother through this process, just loving the space and feeling so good there. So I initially rented it from him for 3 months. We did part of Weird Ones for Matt during that time, and 3 months became 6 months, became a year.
Right on.
And then after a year, Dave and I just kind of looked at each other and said, hey, let's like partner up and just, kind of have this space together. And it's really our private space. But every now and then we, rent it out to friends and try and do little events there and stuff like that. But it's beautiful. It's just in the middle of the woods. We call it the treehouse because it's kind of on 3 levels and there's a deck all around and it's all windows. So it's just a special space. And yeah, that place and Dave as a person, they've just provided me so much therapy and happiness over the last couple of years that
sick.
Exactly what you need when you're working on creative stuff. You need to be in a good space,
That's right.
So,
well, man, I'm happy to hear all that. And I just want to say thank you very, very much, man, for coming today.
I'm so
and
honored.
Speaking
it's
on all of this.
So fun to chat about music. And it's so fun to hear more about your story as well. And it's so funny that we have so many friends in common too, right?
Well, that's why I figured I would just not hesitate and ask.
I love it. I'm so happy. So happy we got to do this.
So am I, man. This has been very informative.
Cool.
And again, thank you very much. Have a good day, guys, and see you soon.